Welcome back. You're listening to the panel discussion, Adopting a Zero Trust Security Model, sponsored by Okta on Federal News Network. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guests today are Bob Costello, the Chief Information Officer at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency at the Homeland Security Department, Bo Hauser, the Chief Information Security Officer at the Census Bureau in the Commerce Department, Larry Kiger, the Executive Security Advisor of the Worldwide Public Sector at Amazon Web Services, and Sean Frazier, the Federal Chief Security Officer at Okta. Last segment, we talked a lot about this idea of moving into this microsegmentation, understanding roles, responsibilities, but also really understanding whether dynamic versus static type of microsegmentation and then applying the rules around it. The other side of that is you also have to look into how identity plays into the crown jewels, the high impact type of data that you're trying to protect or systems you're trying to protect. Let me go to Bob at CISA to start, because as you said, you got a lot of security, a lot of people who are smart on security and probably want access to a lot of the data. So how are you looking at this high assurance levels and applying the zero trust / identity management?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And certainly when we're discussing our high value assets, those are the crown jewels. You know, they are the systems that when they go down, agencies' missions are impacted. You know, Bo has the same challenges at Commerce. There's systems that when they go down, people cannot accomplish the mission that, you know, we are chartered to do. So I think a lot of it here at CISA is first, you need very deep relationships from your CIO in CISO's office with your customers. You need to understand the data, and you know, when we talk about impact levels, what happens if that data is disclosed? You know, who needs access to the data within the agency? And that's something that we're starting to do here as we work through things. There is also a lot of conversation around, you know, here we work through FedRAMP, not the DoD impact levels, you know, moderate, high. We deal with a lot of questions. You know, I'll hear, well, Bob, I can't possibly put my data in a commercial cloud. I need to be in GovCloud. That may not necessarily be true. We may be able to do some really amazing things on the commercial side to secure your data. I think one of the other areas that is sometimes challenging is this is a continuous evolution. It does not stop at any point in time. You know, these conversations have to be continuous as we onboard new employees. How are we going through that, you know, that entire process to make sure they have access to what they need, that maybe when people do a detail, they get access to new information, that information is then, you know, back to the restricted mode when we go off of it. And we had some good conversations earlier. It's not just about people. What systems have information to data? You know, when I first started in IT, we won't say when that was, but it was, you know, during a time where if I needed to connect two systems, you just open them up to each other. You're like, well, we'll just, you know, let this database fully talk to that database, and you know, who cares? We need to share information. Can't do that anymore. Yeah, you know, you need to be looking across the line. So microsegmentation, some of these other things that we're discussing here, it's at the system level too. Are you checking to make sure that system A doesn't have too much access to system B? You know, they need to be able to just share that information that is required to accomplish the mission. So those are some of the things here, Jason, that are potentially keeping me up at night.
Bob, let me just jump in real quick before someone else wants to weigh in. When you talk about you're just getting started at talking to your customers, a lot of times we hear from CISOs and CIOs the customer journey, customer mapping. That's a popular one on the CX world outside, looking outside. But internally, are you understanding, okay, here's this database, here's its high impact level, who needs it, when do they need it, how do they need it, who needs to read it, who needs to write against it? Is that all what you kind of, the analysis you're doing?
Yeah, and here I talk a lot about an operator-centric mindset. How do I and my team think like the operators that we support? So if you're a threat hunter, I need to understand what you need to do your job. And my team needs to have a deep understanding of that. I'm very big on, this is something I did at, you know, ICE and CVP. How do I embed my teams with my customers? How do we sit down, you know, the best systems I helped develop the 9 years at CVP were when we were sitting down with Border Patrol officers, OFO agents, Air Marine agents, and saying, what do you need to do your job? Often I think that when we talk about doing like agile software development, we sometimes don't get quite down still in government to that actual user. We're maybe talking to a business owner at headquarters who wants to do things a certain way. There is nothing that beats sitting down with the actual end users and understanding their job and their role and the information they need access to. Because I don't want to be that CIO that is building these very restrictive security policies because I have to, and then I'm finding out no one can accomplish their mission. That's not where we want to be, and that's not where my passion lies. So I think also when we talk about tech debt, a lot of us across government, potentially have systems that are quite open still. I think that everyone is working very hard at that. But there are still systems out there that probably operate in older models that'll be hard to secure. That maybe we'll still have to rely on that castle and moat a little bit. If you're working on a 50-year-old mainframe system, you're going to do the best that you can, but you can't shut it down. Because it's doing something that maybe is going to be very difficult to modernize into something new, and it's all that risk trade-off. Am I protecting things enough? Am I doing all the right things that we need to do to secure our systems? And honestly, Bo and I mean, our main function is to protect the American public, to provide services to the American public. So, we keep that in mind every day when we come to work here at CISA. What are we doing to protect the American public?
That's absolutely true. At Census, our lifeblood is that public's trust in us, right? Because without the information we collect with them, we're out of business. So we take that very, very seriously. One area, I'll give you a quick anecdote and then we can move it forward. But one area we had a lot of success in for 2020 was with DLP technologies. We were able to label every bit of information that we collected, and then we had policies in place that governed that data and where it could move, where it couldn't move, and full visibility at that data layer. Now it's very apparent that was also very, very zero trust centric, right? And it was a great sort of capability that we leveraged, and the something that we're looking at moving forward. Yeah.
So I think Bob brought up some great points about technical debt, and we've talked about that a couple of times. When Okta started 12 years ago, we made conscious decisions to be a cloud-only company. We made a conscious decision to kind of use Amazon for our infrastructure. 5-6 years ago, we made a conscious decision to invest in FedRAMP and become FedRAMP moderate and be able to help the federal government do this. And to me, cloud is not really necessarily just about cost savings. In the early days of cloud, it was all about, I'm going to save money because I want to outsource all this to cloud. But what it really is it's about focus. It's about the ability to kind of augment your capabilities with the capabilities of someone that does something for a living. So for example, Okta does identity for a living. We live and breathe it. That enables you to focus on some of the things that Bob talked about, which is spend time with your business unit, spend time with your users, focus on your applications. If you're not spending the money on building an entire identity stack, you can spend a whole lot more money and time on focusing on what you do for a living and focusing with your users. It's also the reason why about 2 years ago we started embarking on higher assurance levels in Okta for Okta for government. So for example, FedRAMP High in GovCloud, an impact level 4 environment in GovCloud connected up to the DISA cloud access point. So these are investments that we're making, that we're working on through the course of this year. Because if we think back to what I said earlier about identity being critical infrastructure, ever since SolarWinds and all these things have kind of happened, it's like, look, we need to get a handle on identity security. It needs to be in a higher assurance level environment so we can talk about the things like supply chain risk and all the things that we care about around identity. So we're making the investments and moving in that direction. I'm sure other people will follow.
Sean brought up something around supply chain risk. Let me shift over there because I think it's something we talk a lot about. But when it comes to identity and access management, when it comes to your move to zero trust, the supply chain piece is huge because if you can't trust what you're buying, whether it's software from Okta or the cloud from AWS, you're in a tough spot. So Larry, maybe start with you on this one. From a supply chain perspective, what are some of the questions you get from your government clients and how do you answer them?
Yeah, I think probably our two Fed customers over here will talk about, a little bit about this too. But, I hear a lot like, where are the processors coming from? How are you protecting my data in terms of like, where's it going? How are you going to, keep that safe? I know that there's a lot of questions around even risk, kind of risk avoidance and risk aversion, as it comes, pertains to that. So, I think, customers, at least that I'm speaking with now, aren't really asking, quite the questions that we would normally see from, say, somebody like maybe CISA, right? When they're talking about, hey, look, here's what we think of, right? When we're talking about, how do you do your software supply chain or things like this. So I'd really, I'm really interested to hear from Bob and folks like that too, because these are the guys that are getting the questions from, from the other federal agencies around, like what is, software supply or, software supply chain or hardware supply chain, things of that nature.
I think for me, and you kind of brought up a couple of good points. So supply chain, just across the board, the Department of Homeland Security plays a vital role in the economic security of the country, as well as the supply chain. It's something I learned quite deeply in my time at CBP with our the trade mission there. And I think when we talk about these things, it is vital that we keep systems up and running and secure to ensure the American public is protected. We want to make sure medicine gets into the country, food, everything is kind of going through that supply chain. For me, on this side, it is vital that I know, where am I acquiring hardware from? Is that truly, always careful not to mention vendor names here, but is that router really produced by, that vendor? And I want to know not just the parts that go into it, but where did it stop over on its journey here to America? Why did that plan land in China? That could be a question that we want answered. On software supply chain, I think a lot of us are very interested in that for a few different reasons. I had an opportunity to run a large software development shop in my final year at my prior agency. I learned a lot that I didn't learn before. I was an infrastructure engineer for the big portions of my career. One of the things I learned is, modern development makes it a little bit easier. Yeah, as we're going through pipelines, as we're kind of doing our builds, I think we need to be, cognizant here on the government side that maybe some legacy software will be hard to produce that SBOM for, that nice machine readable format. And I would encourage people, we did an SBOM-orama back in December here at CISA. It's all recorded on our website, and it's a wonderful educational resource. Here from CISA that people can, sit down. All of us, we love technology that are listening to this. So, it's a few hours, but it goes really in depth on SBOM, how we're working with industry. And I think it's still quite current. It was just, happened back in December. And that's available on the CISA website.
All right. Well, thank you. We can link to that too on federalnewsnetwork.com to make it easier on folks. Sean, we're just about out of time, but I'm going to give you the last word. We started off talking a lot about identity access management and zero trust. We know it's pillar number one. It's a focus area of the system maturity model. Same thing from the NSA maturity model. What's the message you want to make sure the folks on the other end who are listening to this are left with around identity access management and zero trust?
The biggest thing is to realize that one of the hardest things about zero trust is people think this is something I got to layer on top of all this stuff I already have. Chances are you're already a little zero trusty. You've already got some of these things in your environment. So figure out where you can leverage those things, where you can bring those into your zero trust model. And think of zero trust as kind of a community approach of security inside your organization. Don't think of it as a product, think of it as a project. Something that you can bring in and ingest and change your muscle memory around security.
All right, and very good. It's definitely not a product.
Not a product.
Got to make sure we keep having to talk to folks about that. Unfortunately, gentlemen, we are out of time, but I very much enjoyed our conversation. So let me thank my guests. Bob Costello is the Chief Information Officer at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency at the Homeland Security Department. Bo Hauser is the Chief Information Security Officer at the Census Bureau in the Commerce Department. Larry Kiger is the Executive Security Advisor of the Worldwide Public Sector at Amazon Web Services. And Sean Frazier is the Federal Chief Security Officer at Okta. Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Jason Miller, and you've been listening to the panel discussion Adopting a Zero Trust Model, sponsored by Okta on Federal News Network. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search Okta.
On behalf of Okta, thank you for joining us. The archive session will be available shortly. If you qualify for continuing education credits, you'll receive an email with your training certificate. This concludes our discussion. Thank you.